welcome to my video. I'm Jennifer Roberts. You're catching me on my YouTube channel, True Divine 44. You can get me on my Facebook page, True Divine, and it is The True Divine for both Instagram and Twitter. Any likes, shares, subscribes and comments on any or all of those platforms is greatly appreciated, and much love to everybody who does that thus far, helping me grow what I'm trying to grow. So this is another writing on the wall, and it is the question of, so COVID didn't work, or did it? And so I've been thinking about this, obviously, because it's been quite a big focus. Now, from my understanding, the whole scenario of COVID is a means to other ends. It's not what we see on the surface. It's not what we are getting told. It is the things that it can cause to happen. It's the domino that has allowed the powers that be, that are all vying for their grab for more power, and to protect themselves from a lot of the secrets that are going to be coming out, especially regarding children and the abuses towards them. That COVID, you know, it has worked to an extent. And so I just jotted down a few things. So if I look down, it's at the notes that I make, because I'm old school, you know, I'm not tech savvy. I like to write. I like to process my thoughts while writing. I feel for me, it's a form of my magic, in that I can transmute thoughts more by putting that energy down into the pen and onto the paper. And then it's always something to go back to, and no electrical event is going to take them away from me. So I like to write. So I put down the truths stroke justice. And so we've got this virus, and by now anybody with brain cells and the impetus to research can see that we've dealt with viruses for so long now. Now, in my feeling, in my memory banks, in my psychic knowings, I don't think in ancient times we had to deal with this. I don't think, and I'm talking about ancient, I don't think that we saw it necessary to control people by causing illness. But when we look at Big Pharma and the introduction of such, when we look at the control mechanisms that the Romans put in, I think that's when viruses really did, and the stories of the plagues really did happen. And so now it's in our history, it's been in our education system, you know, all of these plagues and whatnot. The fear is sort of DNA, generationally passed down in our DNA even, of these hidden enemies, these viruses that cause imbalances in our body and can cause death. And so I think this is a very much manufactured thing in general. And so what does the virus bring? What has it brought? It's brought fear, it's brought control, and it's brought even more conditioning. Now, where people aren't in fear of the virus, they are still in fear of the economic looming crisis, again, manufactured. They're still in fear of the maybe food shortages. They're still in fear maybe of how they will provide for themselves and their family. And so the virus, no matter, you know, where you are, what side of the fence you're on, you know, at some point in time over the last 6 months has caused some sort of fear. Even people of high frequency have had to work extra hard to not fall into the baiting, into that fear baiting. You know, I've had to do some extra meditation, I've had to do some extra grounding, you know, just to keep my frequency high and not fall for the illusions that they're trying to create that would instill fear within me. And so control, you know, we like to think, even the ones of us who are of a high frequency, that nobody can control us. But this system has been in place, these systems have been in place for a long time, and they're vast. And this is sort of a a showing off, a flexing of the muscles to show just how complex and worldwide spread these systems are, and how at flicks of switches they can turn things off. They can turn off deliveries, they can turn off trade, they can turn off hospital visits, they can turn off general appointments, they can turn off life-giving operations that were planned operations for other things other than a virus. They can turn all of that off because they have infiltrated the systems and built the systems themselves for such a long time that, you know, it is vast. So no matter how high frequency you are, there has been some level of control that then we've had to go and ground ourselves and lift ourselves out of. And it's brought conditioning to many people. So you see people wearing masks, paper thin masks, you know, that really, you see them wearing them down past their nose here on their mouth. You see, so the cognitive dissonance here, the wisdom is not behind these decisions that they're making. It's just another show of how much propaganda the mainstream media, bought and paid for, can force people, condition people into doing something that makes no sense. Makes absolutely no sense, goes against how our immune system even works. And so we see that kind of conditioning. We see the conditioning of people being afraid to hug their relatives, people being afraid for their children to meet and greet and play, people being afraid of closeness of any kind with this 2-meter rule or whatever the rule is right now. So we see that there's conditioning of the human mind to start being suspicious. I see people when I'm walking around the shops or the park or wherever, if you cough, I've got asthma, so I can often cough. Now I always do it politely, catch the cough in the elbow, but you know, you see these people who have fallen for this conditioning and this control epically. You see them nearly have a coronary of their own because you're coughing. If you sneeze, you see people jumping out of the way. And so their conditioning, you know, has the virus worked there? To a great extent, yes, because those things have been able to be put in place within quite a few people. The fear, the extra control and the conditioning. And so we see that actually this, for people of higher frequency, are starting to put together the picture, and for people who are becoming more and more aware, starting to put the picture together that, you know, actually this system isn't a safe system. The way that the powers that be and the very, very few have control of very, very much is not actually safe for the collective. It's not a safe place to be. Where we thought people had guaranteed jobs in certain industries, gone. Where we thought people would always be able to be encouraged to open their business, gone. Schooling system, gone. Hospital system as we knew it, gone. And so why? Because too few have too much control over far too much. And so we see that actually we need to really start working and lift ourselves out of complacency to go against the system, to start growing our own fruit and veg as much as we can. Those of us who have bigger gardens or land, you know, to start fulfilling the need of the community as best they can, to start sharing, to start working out ways that we can enjoy a reality where not one small group of globalists can have control over everything that we can do, every movement that we can make, every trade that we can make, every supply that we can meet, every medical need that we can meet. And so, but to an extent, we are still dealing with the many who are under this fear, under this control and under this conditioning. So as far as the virus working on that front, it's working relatively well. Now, some people are clapping their hands and saying, yeah, but not many people are falling for it. There's loads of people becoming more aware. Yes, they are, but what are they actually doing about it? Is it just that we have been shown for who we are? The people who are the divergents, the people who, is this just a gauge to see just how many people and just where those backgrounds of those people are that will go against their beloved systems? And so we do have to box clever, and we do have to open up a dialogue about this and really think of this in a real broad spectrum. And so the next thing I wrote down is the division between the fearful and the not. And so we look back in history and we look back to see that the World War I, World War II, you know, they used the people, they harnessed the power of the people. The few powers that be harnessed the power of the people. They played an exponential act of them hating each other. Now, they probably weren't acting too much about their hatred of each other, but their love of control far outweighs their hatred of each other. When we were led to believe that we were fighting for our country, fighting for our freedom, you know, that freedom was only threatened on both scenarios by some people that had been employed to do so and harnessed with power to do so by the hidden hand, so to speak, the then globalists, the few behind the scenes. And so we sent our people off like cannon fodder to fight for freedom, because we felt it in our hearts, that love for our country, that love for our people. And so at that point, we see in history over and over again where we see people attacking other people, people who should be sticking together within the same countries, people who, communities of people, labeling, marking people out. Why? Because they were living in fear. So they were doing it so that they could save their families. They were doing it so that they could show their allegiance. They were making sure that certain Jews were wearing the yellow banded stars that Hitler gave. So they were labeling these people. They were causing the separation. They were causing the divide. Why? Not because these people hadn't lived together, probably known each other for so long, watched each other's children grow up, watched each other's family members grow old. No, not because of that, but because the fear factor was more than the love for their neighbours. And so they started turning on people, making the authorities aware when the people who the authorities were trying to tread down and make the sacrificial lamb, so to speak. They wanted to prove their allegiance, to save their own skin, to save their own family. You know, by doing that, by shopping, by telling on certain parts of their community, by stabbing their brothers and sisters of their community in their backs, because they had had that fear instilled in them that if they didn't, they were just relieved that actually for whatever reason, they were born with the right colour skin. They were born with the right accent. They were born in the right bloodlines. So that it was just for them, but just by the grace of God, that they hadn't been, labelled as the people to be the sacrificial lambs. And so today we see people turning on each other. We see people just like the armbands that were being made to be worn in World War II. We see people pointing out people who haven't got masks on. We see people accosting people that aren't wearing their masks. I've even seen people accosting people wearing their mask below their nose, but because this other person hasn't conformed and hasn't got something just around their face, anywhere on their face, to show the confirmation of themselves, they're being attacked viciously. And so we see that yet again the cycle repeats itself, history repeats itself, the sins of the fathers come back to haunt us when we allow ourselves to be impregnated with this fear. We turn on each other. Now, why is this a huge part of any plan? It's because there's too many of us. If we would realize that actually by sticking together, no matter our differences, no matter our colors of skin, no matter our beliefs, if we just realize the fact that human life is worth something, and that as a collective, no matter our differences, we stick together against those that would harm any of us, regardless, again, of all of the things I've just listed before, then, you know, we wouldn't be able to be controlled and manipulated and conformed this way. So they have to hook into the mind, because they haven't got enough guns in the world to control the all. So they hook into the mind. They instill this fear. They work out a certain group of people to make the sacrificial lambs, and then they embolden and lift up the other group of people, so that then the people are doing the work for them, crossing each other's paths and doing the work for them. This is a huge part of any plan if you look back at history, and if you look back at our last 6 months. And so we see people reporting people, we see people falling out over whatever their theories might be. We see people frightened and fighting because tensions are high. Like I said before, the form of control of taking away provisions, taking away jobs, closing businesses, making it impossible for businesses to be able to afford to open up again. We see all of that. That's part of the seeds that have been planted to cause the tension, to cause the fear, to cause the destruction of the society. And then, as they always plan, they start crossing people. They bring out certain things, like it's symbolism, like it was the armbands then, it's the masks now. We see that, you know, the fear of, and that to have that symbolism, they need something like the mask or the armband for the people that they want to attack, the other people that aren't wearing them. They need something to be able to point out the division, the separatism of the community. So today, our armbands are the masks. So, and I don't care if that sounds, the people might get upset and say, well, World War II was far worse than, and the Jews had it far worse, where I mentioned the armbands. I'm not even getting into the small parts of that. World War II is very close to my heart. My granddad suffered greatly. My granddad was a hero during World War II. I have his blood running through my veins, so nobody need question me on the atrocities that I learned about as a child, that I made it my business to look into from being a child right up until present day. Nobody need question the fact that I do not treasure all life. I don't see skin colour. I don't see accent. I don't see language. I don't hear language. That's not me. I was brought into this world, the generations down from my grandfather, with his blood in my veins, and he was not racist. He was not prejudiced. He was for his community. He was for his people. No matter what that individual was, he was for the community. So, and just because, you know, when I'm mentioning the comparison between the armbands and the masks, they've gotten better over time. Everything that has time to be tested and refined, they've refined their process. So yes, it doesn't feel as aggressive, it doesn't feel as in your face, but believe you me, that's only because they've gotten better at being more subtle, at being more under the surface, at being even more hidden from plain sight. And so that I stand by what I feel, in that the masks are the new armbands, just in a much more refined and slowly played out state. And so then we have the truth. So the truth comes out and everybody's saying, well, of course it hasn't worked. There's so much truth coming out. They're even admitting now and again the numbers were wrong, the tests were wrong, and people sort of say, well, it can't be that bad. So then people are attacking the conspiracy theorists because they're saying, well, no, mainstream media is reporting the fact that the hospitals and doctors have admitted that, you know, things have been blamed, deaths have been blamed on COVID when it wasn't COVID. So people start to question the impending doom that the conspiracy theorists are talking about, the seriousness that the conspiracy theorists are talking about. The best thing you can do, you see, is when you're trying to get away with something, when you're lying, is come clean. Come clean. Allow the very mainstream media that the conspiracy theorists have been talking about for so long as being one of the most corrupt things in our present day. Allow them to look like the good guys to the people who still watch them, to the people who are probably listening and wearing the masks and doing exactly as they're told, keeping 2 meters away from family members, that the week previous to all of this starting, they would have shared the same plate and eaten off the same plate. And so make them look like the good guys. The best thing you can do is be in your face about it, because then, one, it causes questions, so more division against the people who are aware to the people who are very, very deeply asleep and watching mainstream media. And so those questions, that causes more division. But then we have the fact that the truth about the hospitals, these conspiracy theorists are then putting out the truth about hospitals being empty, about people being laid off, not having jobs, hospital staff being told not to speak to any media, not to put out any truth about the fact that, you know, they're not overrun. It's not Armageddon scenes. And even the hospital wards that might be made to look like Armageddon scenes is only because they've shut down, you know, 20 other wards that usually would have been in use every day also. So the few wards that are open are very full and very busy and overrun. It's all a play. But the conspiracy theorists that have been doing Fill My Hospital and whatnot, you know, don't get listened to quite as much as they would have done, because mainstream has already started just dropping nuggets of truth about corrupt numbers, corrupt tests into the consciousness, into the waters. So people think, oh no, it's not all bad. You know, they're coming clean. There's some good guys in the system. They're working for us still. They're still telling us the truth as they should be. And so complacency comes in yet again. And then the people who are aware and knowing the truth find themselves only speaking to other people who are pretty much aware and know the truth. So again, that number of truth knowers, of truth seekers, stays relatively small. They're so good at the mind games, they're so good at the strategy, but they don't change the script much. They don't do that. And so then they bring out there's the deniers and the uplifted. So we've got even more division. We've got the people who would deny and fight for their organised religion, telling them what this is all about and everything's going to be okay. We've got them ready to fight for their organised religion of mainstream media that they watch every single night, that then follow on the soaps or whatever else they watch on repeat. And then we've got the uplifted, who feel liberated, the higher frequency, who feel liberated, thinking all of this truth is coming out. And don't get me wrong, it is a really good thing and very, very necessary. But again, that breeds complacency, even in the high frequency, even in the uplifted. I'm saying complacency. Complacency that would still externalize the saviour in certain political figures. Complacency to think that, you know, the plan isn't working. you know, actually something's gone awry. We're actually doing something here to shift these systems, to shift these powers and controls out of the very few hands. But are we? Or is that just to keep us satiated? Is that just to keep us still in our slow numbers and small numbers? Is that just to keep us going round in circles, speaking to each other, speaking to the other aware people? See, I think it is. Because I think the movement of awareness needs to be far, far more aggressive, far, far more outspoken, far more potent, if we are to dream of shifting the system. And so it's not that it's not a fantastic thing and that I'm super positive about it. It's just that I don't want my high frequency brothers and sisters to fall into this complacency also. And I'm not talking about aggression in a way of violence. It's exactly what they want. I'm not talking about anything like that that would be then put us into a lower frequency. But I'm talking about strategy. There needs to be more strategy, and there needs to be more oomph to our truth telling, to our awareness pill, our awareness making, and not to get complacent. Just like the deniers get complacent because, oh, they're telling the truth, they're saying they're sorry, they got all of these tests wrong and it was China's fault, it's China, blame China. It's the same pharmaceutical companies buying these testing kits, the same government bodies buying these testing kits that have been like that with China behind the scenes for many, many years. And then we've got the uplifted saying, thank goodness people are becoming more aware because finally we've pushed them to the point where they've had to tell the truth. We didn't push them there. They did that deliberately because they did see that we were making a difference. They did see that people were getting very aware and very high frequency. So they strategized and put it in our faces. So do not get complacent, high frequency brothers and sisters. Do not start to rest on your laurels thinking we have shifted things enough that we're going to make a huge difference. Be powerful in your knowledge that you are making a difference, but continue your own inner work, continue your work in your community, and as a collective, let's really push this. Because without that, we are just being just as complacent as the deniers of what is happening to us. And then I wrote down the protests. So and again, this cognitive dissonance that, you know, they bring in, and wouldn't you, and to me, I wrote down protest because it proves everything I've just been talking about of their strategy to put everything in your face. This to me highlighted more about the conditioning of the people who are asleep, just how deeply asleep they are, because they will watch protests that, you know, were peaceful by the people and then infiltrated by, again, paid dissonance, paid people to cause them to not just be protests anymore, but riots. And mainstream media actually did a fantastic job of merging those two words that are completely different words and mean completely different things. Peaceful protests, a right of the people that we haven't even really got in the UK, and riots, very separate things. But again, mainstream media did a fantastic job, fantastic stage play of mixing those two together. So when people hear protests now, it's synonymous to riots in their minds. It's synonymous to people who are evil, who are dark, who don't want good change. They just want to destroy and destruct things that good families have worked hard for. So now they've even marred, they've darkened the very power that we had of peaceful protesting, of having our voice heard in a peaceful way. Because the people that we need to make more aware and awaken from their deep, deep sleep now have heard it so often on their mainstream media that the protests and riots mean exactly the same thing. They're the same word. So that was very clever, very, very clever. So the protests and the cognitive dissonance was really shown to me. The conditioning was really shown to me by the fact that the same people then who were still conditioned about virus fear, virus fear, virus fear, wear the mask, virus fear, turn against your people, virus fear, were the same people that were watching the protests and not even talking about the virus. Not even talking about the fact that, oh, they'll be spreading all these germs and look how many will be contaminated now because they've all gotten together. And they were so conditioned that that didn't even wake them up in numbers. That should have woken up millions of people. It should have woken up millions of people to say, hold on a minute. How can the left and whatnot be endorsing these protests when they're making us still the next day, the same day, walk 2 meters apart? When they won't even let more than 2 or 3 of us in a pharmacy at the same time. Yet outside there's protests that nobody's doing anything about. No, the police got stood down. Because again, they wanted to test out, I think, just how asleep people were. And also, again, cause even more division. Because now even so-called aware people, high-frequency people, I've noticed are mixing those 2 words, protests and riots, together. Protesters and rioters, they're putting them in the same basket. So a very powerful thing that the high-frequency people have under their belt, or had under their belt, has been dirtied. You know, the fact that protests and riots in many people's minds, even so-called aware people's minds, are now mixed together. And then it's even put a fear. So they couldn't get to the high frequency people with fear regarding, you know, the boogeyman. So now there's a certain fear in the high frequency community about building up protests, about planning protests, about making our voice being heard in numbers. There's a fear of that. There's a fear of us not wanting to take our children along, just in case another good movement is infiltrated by bastards who will pay people who are all too happy to take the check to come and ruin it and cause it to be a violent outburst that we may not be able to protect our children in. So that again, they're finding different ways to infiltrate the high frequency, to pull down the high frequency, to have the very brothers and sisters in the community pull on the ankles of the high frequency, to drag them down into the lower frequency, into that fear factor. And then we have the distraction. The protest caused this distraction in that, yes, they were coming out with their truth bombs about how the numbers had been corrupted, how the numbers weren't real. Yes, they were coming out with the truth bombs about the testing and about China being involved with the testing kits being wrong. But they didn't, because the protest took away the spotlight on that. They didn't even have to answer those questions to very many people. They weren't made to be answerable to people, because now these mainstream media watchers were talking about protests when really they turned to riots. So they're tainting and infiltrating every aspect of our movements that they can. And that again has happened throughout history. If you look at the hippie movement, the flowers in their hair, that was a much more powerful movement than it's now looked back on. You know, people that were involved in that, really, people who weren't the paid rioters of the time, you know, they were really lifting their frequencies. They were learning how to love. They were learning how to rely on community around them. They were learning how to share food, and that was how to really use hemp in all of its glory, as clothing, as fuel, as medicine. So our good movements over and over again have been infiltrated and tainted. So what's the answer? I haven't got a golden answer, a golden rule. Well, actually I have. The only thing I can guarantee that will make this so that it doesn't work, so that this virus and this transition they're trying to push us through doesn't work to maintain their control, is that we individually and therefore then collectively continue to do the inner work. That is the only way we make ourselves as impenetrable as possible to the fear, the conditioning and manipulation. Because for as long as we harbour wounds that we are too frightened to face, as long as we act out of exaggerated ego, as long as we hold on to things that cause us to be insecure or frightened, that's a hook, that's a way in, it's a crack, and a crack is all that they need. And so far the virus is working quite nicely for them. If you look at the fact that globalists have had trillions of pounds, dollars, whatever it's in profit over this last 6 months, while businesses go under, while people who had their own small businesses don't know how they're going to provide in the future. They're willing to sacrifice a little bit of the Target shop here, Target shop there, a statue here, a statue there. They're willing to stand on stage and look like, oh, so shocked and horrid, oh, so upset. Because they're making trillions. And they're working together. Even the sworn enemies, China and the other governments, working together behind the scenes at the highest level to infiltrate our inner worlds, because that's the only way they can get us to act out the way they want us to in our outer world, in division, in fear. And so it's just a discussion here of, you know, when we're looking at this situation, to just concentrate on